I think that Agile and the software community, from our experience trying to build products that people can't really specify and can't really define in a market that's always changing, I think that there's some great ideas that we can bring to businesses and industries that maybe we weren't thinking about helping out.
ProCognita, Get Agile podcast.
How can the Agile movement help companies affected by disruption? Interview with Robin Dymond. Hi, and welcome to Get Agile podcast. Today with me is Robin Dymond, a certified Scrum Trainer from Canada, but he also has some good experience from Europe and the USA and a few other countries as well, I guess.
Hey, Tomek, how's it going?
Good, thank you. We just started.
Do you remember my coffee cup from Slovakia, from the castle? Nice.
We just started with the discussion about the disruption. So we get the COVID as a huge disruption, certainly the painful one, but not the only one. So how about we continue that direction?
Sure, it sounds great. It's just so your audience knows, Tomek and I have been working together since 2011. He's a great Scrum Trainer based in Poland, and
that was part of the advertising that we didn't plan for, but that is working.
So we've done a lot of work together over the years with various clients in Poland, and he's a big skier. So eventually we're going to get together and go skiing. I hope. So, So, we've seen a lot of disruption over the last couple of years, and I wanted to talk about this because I think there's something unique the Agile community can bring to the world that is maybe not front of minds as we're working with IT companies and software companies and sort of focused on that business. In 2020, just from our experience as Scrum trainers, we would do all of our classes in person. And so, when Tomek and I would work together, I'd come to Poland and we'd work together. And so we had a big disruption in our business in trying to bring these workshops into an online setting.
Well, there was assumption you cannot do this online, basically.
Right? Yeah, that's actually great point. Yeah, there was an assumption, and I held that assumption that we couldn't do these things online, and we were wrong. But we weren't the only ones. Businesses have been had to totally change how they operate in the pandemic. With working remotely, with using tools like Zoom we're using today, or Microsoft Teams, or what have you, to be able to collaborate online and to figure this out. And so, this has been a really disruptive change to businesses. But it's also demonstrated to all of us that actually change can happen much faster, much more rapidly, and much more deeply than we thought in the past. And as someone who's worked in Agile since 2002 and worked on major Agile transitions in both North America and in Europe, there's always, a significant resistance to this kind of a change. And often an assumption in some of these larger organizations that this is sort of how we work. We can't really work that way. And I think that from a leadership perspective, an organizational perspective, we've seen COVID transform organizations. There's an article in the New York Times where the chief operating officer of a 140-person law firm said, I and all of my colleagues don't see any reason for us to go back to working in the office full time. And these are lawyers. Lawyers are not bastions of technological change and advancement. Like, these are the people who are still using fax machines when everyone else is using email. So to have the COO of a law firm in New York say, yeah, we're not going back to, 5-6 days in the office, 8 to 5.
So what you're saying is we need a catastrophe to make the changes go faster.
Well, life happens, and this, these kinds of disruptions are actually going to get more and more prevalent. So right now here in Canada, British Columbia, I'm in Alberta. To the west is the West Coast, the province on the West Coast, and BC has had a series of 5 atmospheric rivers, which are basically these streams of high moisture atmosphere coming from the Hawaiian area, from the tropics up the coast. And there's been massive flooding. And BC is connected by 3 major roads to the rest of Canada. All of those roads were washed out. So you had, 4 million people on the West Coast, the Vancouver Island, the Lower Mainland, which is where a lot of the population of the province is, completely cut off from the rest of Canada. So
what you're saying, you ended up with having Canada ended up with having an island with the Caribbean weather, or from Hawaii weather, right? This is what you get.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't need to go to south to Florida now.
Yeah. So BC is really mountainous, and over the summer they had a very bad wildfire season. And so when you have wildfire, the soil gets a bit of a crust on it, and you don't have the plants to absorb the water. So there have been massive mudslides or landslides. There have been 4 kilometers of train track that's basically hanging in the air because the base has been washed out because it's so mountainous. And so this has caused a ton of disruption in Canada, really close to home, right? And this isn't just happening here, right? It happened in Germany and Belgium in the summer with the flooding. It's been happening in the U.S. for some time now, especially on the East Coast, Florida, where they get hit by hurricanes. So we've also seen with COVID, disruption of supply lines. So pretty substantial disruption. We also saw the big boat. Remember the big boat that's stuck in the Suez?
Everybody knows about the big boat.
Everybody knows about the big boat, right?
If the people don't get a Christmas present, they also will know about the problems with the supply chain by
yeah. And so the world has been running a certain way for quite a while, and some of those supply chains have been really leaned out, but they're also super long. So when you have a supply chain that's really lean, just in time, and really long, it's fragile, right? Because the length of the supply chain means that you have more chances of that supply chain being disrupted.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if they're lean or starving to death in that case, right? So isn't because the lean is still, you assume you have some ability to aggregate an variation that is happening, and the variation right now is huge, which basically means that the lean is not lean anymore, because you have either a lot of stuff in the port, or you don't have enough stuff in the place where you're shipping those things, right?
Yeah. So here in North America, this has been huge, right? The supply chain disruptions. I mean, Ford and General Motors have both, shut down manufacturing plants for a couple months because they just can't build the cars, because they can't get the semiconductors for the cars. And so, we have this sort of confluence of COVID, supply chains that are fragile, and continuing disruption from climate change. So now, if you're a logistics person working in a logistics company, you're pretty used to having an operational model that you can just follow, right? The work you do day to day sort of stays the same. Yeah, some shipments are later, so you have to deal with the delays, but you don't have to deal with complete breakdown of your business model. And I think that this disruption, like if you're in an office that's normally running day to day in an operations kind of mode, and you end up with these sort of big changes in your environment, those offices turn into chaos, right? Because they don't have the mechanisms to deal with the uncertainty, the variability, and how to manage effectively in that environment. And I think when we think about what we've been doing in Agile for a long time is managing through a lot of uncertainty and a lot of variability. And so I think that Agile and the software community, from our experience trying to build products that people can't really specify and can't really define in a market that's always changing, I think that there's some great ideas that we can bring to businesses and industries that maybe we weren't thinking about helping out. Right? And so I think that this is my focus for the next 10 years is going to be, helping organizations use these ideas to become more adaptive and more resilient, so that climate change and the wave N of COVID isn't totally disruptive and totally stressful to the people in the organizations. They can find ways to become more adaptive and resilient using some of the principles from Agile and some of the practices as well.
So what I'm hearing from you basically, to summarize this one, is like most business just learn about the Cynefin framework in the hard way, moving from the simple to chaos. And now it's time to help them out, except that we're not trying to do yet another Agile in law or Agile in HR project, but it's more like a profound change into this organization. This is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And the reason I think we can bring that to leaders and organizations today is that they've seen firsthand how their organization changed due to COVID, right? And having to work in a completely different way. So they know it's possible, right? They've just been through it. So we have an opportunity window in which we can, talk to these folks and say, hey, we understand, you have this disruption in your business. We have some ideas that can help you. And start thinking about how we can help organizations become more adaptive and more resilient. And I think this goes beyond Agile, right? Back to the supply chain thing. If we want to do more lean process and be just in time, we still have to have resilience in the supply chain, which means actually not optimizing for every nickel and dime in the supply chain. It means building some redundancy in there, having multiple suppliers that you can pull from. So, if you can't access a supplier in China, you can access a supplier more close to home.
So basically you have a higher capacity than the need, just in case.
Yeah, higher capacity or access to higher capacity, right? Whether or not you use it, whether that supplier works for another company or not, but you basically have to build some excess capacity into the system in order for you to be able to respond to change. Because if you're just strung out so tight and some change happens, there isn't capacity to respond.
So what I'm hearing is like the very first step is, first of all, reaching to those people and then convincing them that's the problem and we know the solution, or we know how to find the solution. And I guess you have some ideas about that already. So can we look into this one? How do you reach them?
Yeah, how do you reach them? I think that, our most successful Agile transitions have been pull-based, right? Basically someone asking for help. You can't force somebody to change. You can't force someone to adopt a set of ideas.
We've seen this in few banks and other companies trying to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
You end up with the Spotify model.
Yeah. Yes, that's what we need in our mutual fund, Spotify.
Hey.
Because we're pivoting to audio streaming. So the in terms of helping companies, so I want to broaden this a little bit too, because we've been talking about supply chain and private businesses, and I think that this actually goes much beyond that, because we have civil society, we have government organizations, right, who also are dealing with this constant change. And the other, big issue that we have in front of us is how do we pivot to a low carbon economy? And that is going to be a very expensive proposition, right? Governments are going to be spending billions and billions of euros and dollars to make this transition. And whenever you have big projects like that, there's huge opportunity for waste. So again, sort of projects that are going to be managed in a more traditional sort of, everything's going to be fine approach, have the possibility of wasting billions of our tax dollars, right? So I think that this is another, area where Agilists can help. A colleague of mine, Simon Orrell, worked on applying Scrum principles to building a gas processing plant with a large oil and gas company here in town. So successfully, did 4 more using Agile and Scrum principles. Now, if there was one industry I would think you wouldn't be able to apply Agile and Scrum, it was construction. But lo and behold, lots of good value provided in those projects. Those projects normally are hundreds of millions of dollars, and they usually run 30+% over budget. This project came in, the first plant they did, and the first plant, right? Their first attempt at doing this came in at 10 or 15% under budget and on time. And this is sort of unheard of in this business, right? And these are big capital projects, right? Saving 10%, means millions and millions.
Yeah, sounds cool. And by the way, if we have any links to those documents, we can share them later
Sure.
in the video description. So
Yeah.
cool, because this is happening. This is happening in Tesla. This is happening in production. This is happening, what you say, in construction. However, what I also see is this is often not happening in software development. So we're trying to reach to the other areas, and we still have some challenges on our, let's call it, the base market.
Yeah. So what are you seeing there, Tomek?
That's tricky. That's my interview.
That's all right.
All right. That is the an Agile code working with the questions. Thank you.
Yeah.
So what we get? Is there are 2 things happening. And first of all, what you say is like companies realize this is the way of working. So like you can reduce a bit spending by having a long lead time for the new product delivery, which is great when you are building the same building for the next 20 years, which is not the case for most of the companies. So what the companies figure out is like the time that the product will be on the market is going to be shorter. This is what we know. So you either speed up your development, even it costs more, then you need to speed up the development. I mean, the new product development.
Yeah.
Or you end up with having a product 2 years too late, which basically means out of the time frame, out of the time window. So we see those companies, but at the same time we see the companies who are just copy pasting the Agile ideas, and the Agile is now overused as the word. I guess the same happened with Lean. So everybody has Lean now. Most companies has Agile. Some of companies has Agile 2.0. So I'm hearing what you're saying, but at the same time, I just wonder how we make it happen on the global scale, because that need to be a huge transformation, and it's not huge in software development yet either.
Yeah, I think it's a mixed, right? I think we see companies who are very, very adept at building products this way. Here in Canada, we have a new startup in the financial technology space called Wealth Simple. and they have 80 engineers. They push to production 150 plus times a day, right? So they've gotten to the point where they don't even have a rollback strategy because their changes are so small that if they have a bug in production, they just go fix it. And they're able to, they have a great pipeline. They do a ton of automated testing, and that system, that's 500 person company that's just kicking butt in financial services in Canada. So I think that there still is this aspect of survival and change, right? And if you're a company competing against them, then you've got your work cut out for you, because I would say that they're moving 10 times the speed of a traditional bank, right? So if they can sustain that pace, and they are, over years, then certainly the bottleneck isn't going to be in product development. The bottleneck might be in marketing, the bottleneck might be in reaching customers, but R&D is moving faster than probably the rest of the business. And in most companies, that's not the case, right? So I think that's a great example. On the other side, I'm working in a coaching engagement with a client, and they have an ERP system they're implementing, and they were working with a big consulting company who said we're doing hybrid Agile. So they spent the first year of development basically getting their new ERP system set up and creating 2 databases for products and vendors. Woohoo! Yeah, a year of work, and they created it. Now the database has hundreds of vendors and thousands of products. Nothing that you can actually use, right?
Yeah.
And that's sort of hybrid Agile. Oh, our release 1.0 was databases. So what they did is they created a ton of inventory, right? They spent a year building inventory of features, data that we might use later. And so, it was a pivot for them to say, well, let's get one vendor that goes from purchase to payment, right? Where we can order products from that vendor, get them into the warehouse, price them, get them into the retail locations, and they have over 200 retail locations, and get that vendor paid. Let's do that first, right? So that'll take about 3 months. So in 3 months, we'll have working tested software that goes end to end that they can use. That's Agile, right? I don't know what the hell hybrid Agile is. It sounds like waterfall with a different name. And I see this constantly.
With the story points estimation.
Yeah, they weren't even doing that. And the vendor is claiming to be Agile, and
everybody now is Agile, by the way.
Yeah, everyone's Agile, except for they don't know what that means, or they don't do it, or maybe they feel that it's better for their personal interest to keep the client in the dark and say, yeah, we're Agile, we released the database, aren't we great? It's like, that's not value to the business.
So what I'm hearing from you is we get a triangle with the great companies at the top of the triangle. So the more great companies at the top of the triangle, the more company at the bottom of the triangle saying they're doing Agile but not doing much about this one, right? So this is what I'm seeing. So, or hearing at this. So we have more great companies, but at the same time we have a lot of not so great companies.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a process in different industries at different rates. Certainly, the software industry is the furthest ahead, and then other industries that depend heavily on software to run their businesses, like healthcare, IT, and financial services. Those industries, depending again on the sort of the size of the company and the legacy that they have within the organization, they tend to be moving more quickly. I would say the laggards in this business are resource extraction industries, so mining, oil and gas. These companies' business models are predicated on commodity prices.
And don't forget about the software houses who has also resources.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yes. Oil is a resource, and so are humans.
We dig them from the ground, basically, both of them.
No, that's orcs.
Okay.
Orcs.
Anyway, so what we get here is like we had more companies doing this well, a lot of companies doing it badly in software development. I believe that if someone haven't heard about Agile, it's like there might be something interesting about the company by now. But what we see is like there is a huge market outside software development who has a great need, huge opportunity for them to be, more robust. And what you're saying, we're more looking for those people to reach out to us. So the question is how they come to find us, right? So how they start.
Yeah, and I think that this, part of marketing is getting the word out, right, and helping people understand how you can help them, right? And I think that as a community, this is a new direction for us. This is a pivot for us to say, okay, how can we help other organizations, other parts of society, and how can we help them build more resilient and adaptable organizations? So as change happens, and we know that the change and disruption is happening, we know that climate change and disruption is happening at an accelerating rate. Current forecasts are that even if we, turned off carbon production today, the climate would continue to change for the next 30 years. And we know we're not turning off, carbon emissions today. So we are going to see more and more of this kind of disruption going forward, right? And so that means responsive to change in many other industries, and being able to adapt to new changes, being able to think about resiliency, being able to think about how we as societies adapt to this new world. And I think the Agile community is tremendous understanding, and also a mindset to be able to understand, well, you can actually work effectively in this. It doesn't have to be sort of 12-hour days of stress as you try to sort through these problems. And I think that's government as well has a big opportunity to try to, to leverage these ideas to help, deliver the transformations that we need to have to our economies to move to a low carbon world. So I think that it is our responsibility as an Agile community to start getting the word out and start talking to government, to start talking to people in civil society as well, to help them work on these problems, right? It is a big business opportunity, because if people are going to spend billions or trillions doing climate change projects, well, let's get the Agile community in there to help them do this well, right? As opposed to blowing billions of taxpayer dollars on projects that don't work well. It also means a challenge for us, right? Because a lot of those projects are going to involve some aspect of construction and manufacturing. And so that means we need to take our ideas and learn about those businesses and how we can help them.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is basically we need to stop going to Agile conferences for Agile coaches, start going to other places and start learning their language, start learning their technology. So TDD can look a little different there. Yeah. So let's close with the advices from Robin perspective for the Agile coaches if they want to reach out to those different places. What you would recommend to those people?
Start with leadership. And start with leadership. If you have contacts in the organization who can advocate for you, that's wonderful. But I think these kinds of transformations need to start with support from the top. And I think that you have a great message to come into organizations with around COVID and the changes happening in their organization. And we look at the economies right now and the disruptions that's happening. The other thing is to, if you see in the news a company that is being disrupted by these things, right? They have pain. So reach out to those businesses, right? To see if you can help them. And again, so we need leadership support. We need leaders understanding this. Of course, you walk in the door, they're not going to trust you, right? Who are you? They don't know you. So, establishing pilots, pilot agile projects in those organizations, the fundamental, not only learning how to do agile in those organizations with those pioneer teams, but we're also building trust. We're also showing the organization that we know what we're talking about, that we know what we're doing. And I think that, again, we still have people in the loop. We still have to build trust. This is, going to move, I believe, for organizations where leadership really adopts this, they can move much quicker because they now understand that they can. But this is going to require some courage on their part to make these changes in the organization. And so if you can establish trust and have a clear message of hope, right, in the face of these disruptions and how this could be managed differently, then you have an opportunity to make an impact in these companies and hopefully help us get to a place where businesses are more adaptive and still resilient. Same with governments, and we're able to manage through a world which is going to be disrupted on a regular basis now. That's on the menu, and it's not going to change. It's going to continue to get more disruptive. So we need to adapt. And we've had a long time where we had these kinds of disruptions coming in on a regular basis that we maybe our generation hasn't had to deal with. But if you look back to the early 20th century, you had World War I, and then you had the Spanish flu right on top of the end of World War I, and then you had the Great Depression, and then you had World War II. And that was that same generation living through all of that. And there's actually some great lessons that they have as well that we can learn from.
And then we have also communism at the end of this one. Anyway, I mean, that is a pretty nice message for the other coaches. You just remind me of Mike Cohn telling once that he was looking at the newspapers about the new waterfall project starting in the late 90s, and then giving them a call half a year later, asking them if they don't need the help. So maybe that's your idea of checking, the big project that are starting right now and giving them a call a half a year from now. That could be a good reason. I don't know if I just sold out the Mike Kona idea, but maybe he's not using this anymore.
Well, I did get a call from a company doing an ERP implementation, and they're doing hybrid agile. So we'll see what happens with them.
Okay. So we can look for the hybrid agile and give them the call after half a year. That sounds like a business plan. All right, yeah. Rob, thanks for this conversation. And that was an interesting direction we went into there, but it seemed like there is a lot of work for us. So I guess we need to start doing that.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Tomek. It's great chatting.
Thanks. See ya.
To learn more, visit procognita.com/getagile.